Hello and welcome to another Tuesday talk with Ruby Reese. This evening I will be joined by Lea from Harmony for Paws dog training, and we're going to delve into a really important topic, and one I think that the whole country seems to be talking about, and that is separation anxiety. So we're going to try and take apart that topic, and I'm just going to So I think that request didn't go through. You just have to bear with me and my technical abilities for 2 seconds. It shouldn't take too long. And then, Lea, how are you doing?
Hi, hello.
So glad that you're joining me. Would you do us the absolute pleasure of introducing yourself first and foremost?
Of course, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm Lea. I started Harmony for Paws dog behavior and dog training it's going to be 2 years really soon. I am originally French and I've been living in Ireland for a few years. Basically I decided to get into that whole industry because of my little dog who came to me from an awful place with all the possible behavior issues that you can imagine and health issues as well. And basically trying to find solutions for him that would be respectful of his welfare and respectful of his person. I don't know if I can say this, but of him are definitely what drove me to just get into the whole dog behavior thing. So then I just took a course. I qualified as a dog behavior consultant in France. And then a year ago, I decided to specialize into separation anxiety after noticing how present it is among the dogs and how many dogs in Ireland and everywhere in the world were actually suffering from that issue. And so then I certified with Judy Naismith, which is one of the 2 persons who are doing training courses for dog professionals. And yeah, I certified exactly a year ago. And ever since, I've been helping people and dogs, obviously, who are affected by that problem.
Amazing. That's a brilliant introduction. Thank you so much. And really, really looking forward to delving into the topic of separation anxiety. I love the fact that you're coming from a place where you saw, that there's the need for looking after your own dog first and foremost. And then you said, oh, wow, I can do this for other dogs as well, And I think as by way of introduction for anyone that doesn't know me, I'm Killian from Ruby Reese, and we set up Ruby Reese just over a year ago. And we were looking to launch a brand that has a whole range of products that are suitable for, using top quality ingredients that could even be suitable for dogs with allergies, with sensitive skin, sensitive tummies, just like our own dog, Ruby. So yeah, delving straight into separation anxiety, because this is why we're all here. Can you briefly explain what separation anxiety is?
Okay, of course. So basically, we always talk about separation anxiety, but we are actually talking about separation-related behaviors. So what separation-related behaviors are actually behavior that only happen in a greater intensity during absences. Mm-hmm. So there are different categories of separation-related behaviors. So the most common we hear about is isolation distress. So that would be basically dogs that are not okay on their own. Mm-hmm. They need the presence of somebody, but whoever it is will do the job. For example, they can be left with a pet sitter, they can be left with a friend, just anybody will do. They just don't want to be on their own. We also have the more clinical aspect of separation anxiety. So this is actually what separation anxiety is on the clinical term, basically it's dogs that need their person to be okay. Mm-hmm. So you can't leave them with a pet sitter. You can't leave them with anybody else. They need their person. It could be several persons. And basically, it is making it really complicated for their humans, because if they are not okay with somebody else, it is making it more complicated to manage and do the training, because you need to keep the dog under threshold the whole time. Another big category would be fear of missing out behavior. So basically, it is the dog thinking when you're going, they're like, oh my God, I'm going to miss out on like an amazing walk, an adventure. They just want to be with you, and they just get really frustrated, and that turns into a bit of distress. So that's like the three main categories that we can see. But there are also other behavior that can happen when the dog is on their own that could be related to something a bit different than distress. That would be, for example, boredom. If the dog's needs are not really met, for example, they don't get walked enough, they don't have exercise, they're not really, like, their doggy needs are not really taken into consideration, then when they're left, of course, they're not going to feel good because all of that previously hasn't been done. So that's an example. But there's also, for example, when it happens a little bit later in life, it could be due to a medical condition. Like older dogs, for example, they could get canine cognitive dysfunction. And that, for example, can lead into anxiety, and pain is also a really big thing. Because a dog that doesn't feel good, like that topic has been brought up a few weeks ago by Killian and Catherine. So I'm not going to go in details into that, but definitely pain is something that will really make it so much harder for the dog to be relaxed when you're gone, because they already don't feel good when you're here.
Sure. So I suppose if you look at it like maybe a hierarchy of needs, the basic needs, I mean, you need to have covered for your dog anyway, that they're not in pain, that they've had appropriate amounts of exercise. And then you're moving maybe more into the psychological things, like you were mentioning, the isolation distress, where they need to be with somebody, anybody, basically. The clinical separation anxiety, where they need to be with their human or owner or handler or whatever you want to call their person. And then you've got the fear of missing out, which is also more psychological rather than a base. Right?
Yeah. And like basically every time we are dealing with a case, it is really important to do like a deep analysis of the whole general situation for the dog. Like environment, history, relationship, exercise, like basically make sure all the needs are satisfied, and then find a way to just basically understand where it comes from. And once you've done that, you can work like on foundation. Basically, like I think the self-confidence is a really, really big thing, because most dogs that are distressed when they're on their own, they're not really confident in themselves. And that is a bit of a lack even when the human is around. So then when their person or their persons or nobody is with them, they will just feel a bit distressed because there's nobody to validate everything and to just be like making them feel a bit better.
Yeah, and I suppose in a lot of these talks, we talk about the fact that we kind of expect dogs to be less dogs than they were born to be sometimes. You know, in the cafe, you want them sitting pretty next to you and not off sniffing around the place and discovering and exploring. We have so many expectations for them to be almost like human pets as opposed to real dogs, or what they were, you know, wild, if they were wild dogs.
Totally,
So do you think this is leading then to them saying, okay, I'm not really supposed to do all the stuff that my body's telling me to do and my brain's telling me to do, so what do I do?
I think basically those skills that you're mentioning, what I hear here when, for example, you're taking your to a cafe, there's a foundation skill that's really important, is settling. Like if the dog hasn't learned how to settle at home, they haven't learned how to settle in your garden, then it's going to be way harder to settle at the cafe. And it is exactly the same thing that happens with separation-related behaviors. We expect the dogs to be fine. Like we get a dog and then we're going to go to work a few days later and we're like, the dog's going to be fine. But they're not. Like they're social animals. They were, like their ancestors, they were always in group. And being separated from the group is actually a sign of danger for them. So this is a skill that needs, like everything else, that needs to be taught. Even though there's no like predisposition for separation anxiety and the dog is well-rounded and balanced, they will need to be taught how to be on their own and that it's safe Because the thing is, like, when we are going, we know that we're going to come back. But the dog doesn't know when you're going to be back to feed them, when you're going to be back to walk them, when you're going to be back to give them attention. They have no idea. They just see you walking through the door. So if they haven't learned that when you're walking through that door, you're always coming back, they're like, oh my God, who's going to take care of me? And what's going to happen to me? And they actually fear for their survival. Mm-hmm. This is something I think that's really important to acknowledge. Like when a dog is suffering from separation anxiety, they're actually like in panic, like a really big state of panic, the same way we would have a panic attack. Sure. When something stressful, is happening around. They're just like, they're in survival mode. So that's why a lot of dogs won't eat their food when you're gone, or they won't be able to sleep. They will just be like the whole time thinking they literally are going to die. And the only thing that will make them feel better is you coming back.
Sure. And so we hear this, we're out and about and dealing with the public all the time, and the public of dog owners or dogs, humans, of different ages and age groups. And we tend to meet, I don't want to be ageist, but usually an older or, you know, kind of 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s plus person, getting more extreme as you get older, saying, you know, our dogs always stayed at home and they never had separation anxiety. They were always fine. Do you think that there's some truth to that? Or do you think that maybe we're just noticing it more? We're listening to our dogs more?
I think both of those are actually right. Because the thing is, before, like 50 years ago, or my grandparents' time, they're older than that, but like, I don't know, 60, 70 years ago, the dogs were always outside. They were roaming free. They were having all the interactions with other dogs that they would need. They were not like, it's not, I don't know if the appropriate word, stuck with us, depending on everything coming from us. So that is a big thing, because their needs were sometimes more satisfied. They didn't have the comfort they have, like they couldn't go on the couch because dogs were supposed to stay outside back then. But they also had like a really like different life. And dogs were also selected to be our companions over the years, like all the breeds that we have now. A lot of them, they're not supposed to be working dogs. They're supposed to be companions. So they've been like selected for that. And then we expect them to be okay when we're not there. Mm-hmm. And there is the second thing you said about noticing a bit more. I definitely think that is a bit the case, because we are, and I'm really happy about this, that the fact that we're actually paying more attention to our dog needs. And I'd say before, maybe if the dog was howling the whole day, maybe like since like people weren't living so much in apartments like we are now, there was not a neighbor coming, like knocking at the door, being like, your dog barked the whole day. So I think a lot of it could have been like, yeah, maybe he's barking, he'll stop and that's it. So yeah, like those two things are definitely true.
Okay, so there is some truth to it, because I always kind of laugh it off and try not to think about it too much. But I guess you're right, and I suppose as an analogy, if the dog is out playing around the farmyard, they're not going to really care whether you're at home or not.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's that's understandable. We have new expectations as well of the dogs. Mm-hmm. And another question I wanted to ask is, how common is separation anxiety? It sounds like there's a whole group of complex things that are kind of lumped in under one term, separation anxiety, from physical pain being a root cause, right up through to psychological issues that a dog doesn't know how to cope with. So is separation anxiety very common, would you say?
It is really common. There was a study published by the American Veterinary Medicine Association stating that 1 dog out of 5, which is 20% of the dog population, that was suffering from separation-related behaviors. Mm-hmm. So that is like 1 dog in 5. It is a lot, definitely. And whether we notice or not, it is a different story. But there are it is a really, really common issue.
Sure. And And so you mentioned there's, that the studies show dogs show some signs. So let's maybe talk about some of the signs we could be looking out for that could be indicators of dogs suffering from separation anxiety.
So I would say the ones that we hear the most about would be barking when the human is gone. That would be like vocalizing in general, howling, crying, but they are also like destruction, like destructing the place, mainly around the door frames, like because basically the dog is just trying to escape to join you. They're just scraping next to the door. A lot of dog will also be in such a big distress that they will hurt themselves. Like I've had clients with dogs that like really physically injured themselves trying to get out of a crate, trying to go out the door. Salivating would be a big thing, like a dog who's going to be in a big panic. They will be drooling everywhere. Inappropriate elimination. For example, if you have a dog that is generally and reliably potty trained, and when you're going away or out and you're coming back and you find the place soiled, it is really likely a sign that your dog was feeling too stressed and they couldn't even control it. There is like pacing I've seen dogs like the whole time the humans were gone, like walking from one room to another, going to the window, going to the back, going again. Like basically they're trying to just make themselves feel better and relieve a bit of that stress, and they can't settle. They will be the whole time in movement and they won't calm down the whole time. And they are also, those are the tricky to address, because some dogs won't make a noise. For example, there will be dogs that will be shivering the whole time. There will be dogs that just have a really subdued attitude. They will just be in a corner and they won't move, they won't do anything. And if that is out of character and you have a camera and you see your dog like in that kind of attitude, really just trying to disappear, this is also a sign that they can be in a big distress. So it's not only dogs that will make noise, it can, and there's so many ways to express it for dogs, but those would be the main ones. There's the ones that make noise, that make a mess, and usually people call about those ones because the other ones they probably won't even notice. Yeah.
And I suppose now might be a good time as well to speak about misconceptions and myths about separation anxiety. Like, what common ones do you hear that we should just dispel straight away?
Okay, so the first one, and I really, really want people that are listening to really be sure about this. This is not your fault. Like, it isn't. They are, like, because I hear a lot people telling me, yeah, but my dog has separation anxiety, but that's my fault because I let them on the couch and I let them in my bed. That won't give your dog separation anxiety. And in the same association that I mentioned before, there's another article that was, they did a study on like 400 dogs, and basically spoiling a dog was never like a decisive factor in the appearance of separation anxiety. Like, it is not a thing. Like, you can spoil your dog as much as you want. Maybe they will end up having bad manners and they won't want to come out of your bed when you want them to. But that said, you're not going to create like anxiety. Like, we're talking about a true deep fear, and being given a bit of comfort, a bit of love, and some privileges is definitely it's definitely not something that's gonna make your dog anxious for sure. Another thing that we hear a lot is put them in a crate and they'll be okay. So if, for example, for dogs that are distracting, and this is something that's just basically masking the symptoms, because if your dog is distracting, they're trying to tell you something, whether it is because they're anxious, or it is because they're just bored, or they have too much energy, or there's something going on. If you put them in the crate, they might stop to distract, but they could start like expressing it in a really different way. They could start barking. They could start actually hurting themselves trying to get out. So it is definitely not something that will suppress the anxiety. It might mask the behavior. And at some point, maybe the dog is going to be given up. And it is something, to be honest, I'm not a big fan of, because when the dog is giving up, they're just being like, okay, I'm stuck here, so I don't have an option. So I'm just going to let's just stay here. And it doesn't mean they're okay. It just means that like it is the way it is and they have to deal with it. So that's not really good for their welfare. It's not good for their confidence and all of that. There's another thing that I hear quite a lot. That's the dog is trying to get back at the humans for leaving.
Okay.
Like he peed on my couch because he wanted to get back. He wanted to make me pay the fact that I was going out without him. This is like they simply don't have the abilities, the cognitive and thinking abilities. Like basically an adult dog will have the thinking and cognitive abilities of a 2-year-old kid. So they don't have that possibility to plot and to, because they don't know that your couch is worth a lot of money. They don't know that it is annoying for you to clean up after them when they pee there. It's just something that they do because they can't do anything else because they're so stressed that they will eliminate inappropriately. But to them, it is something they didn't choose to do this. They were just so stressed that they did, and that's it. So there's no getting back at you. There's no being naughty. All those dogs, they're actually suffering. And this is something that I really want people to be aware of. Because when it happens, the dog is really, really, really distressed. It's not just a little discomfort. They're actually they're in fear for their life. And imagine feeling that fear every day for like 10 hours a day. So they're like, this is a really important welfare concern. Then being in stress can also lead to health issues.
Absolutely. And I think you really put it well into context, to say they've got the mental abilities of, say, a 2-year-old child, and it doesn't even matter if some of the research says 3 years old. It just takes away a lot of the rubbish that people might have in their mind about, dogs scheming and coming up with this grand plan. It's just not going to happen. So
we would be in trouble.
Yeah, exactly. We'd be in an awful lot of trouble. And do you think some dogs are more prone to separation anxiety than others? I can think of two breeds in particular that would definitely get this stamped on their forehead. But
can I make a guess?
You can make a guess.
Lurchers and Cockapoos?
No, I was actually going to say Great Danes, because their ability, they often tear up sofas when owners are away, and they're supposed to be big emotional giants. And the other one is Chihuahuas, just because they're always shivering and kind of.
Actually, no, I don't. They're it is not my opinion. It is studies that have shown that there are no breed predisposition. Mm-hmm. And I've been mentioning lurchers and Cockapoos because they come up a lot. But it is mostly because they are a lot of them, first of all. So the more they are of their, the more of them they are, the more they will appear in behavior cases. And in lurchers, for example, they're abandoned a lot. And so basically what's creating separation anxiety, it is still a bit of a discussion among the scientists, but there is a bit of genetics. So if, for example, the parents are a bit anxious, and that could be passed on to the puppies. There is life experience. For example, a dog that's been abandoned, they are in a nice situation, or maybe not so nice all the time, but that suddenly they just are given up. And when they find a new family, they start settling a little bit, and then they kind of fear they're going to lose everything at all times, and they don't know they won't. So then they start feeling really anxious when you're leaving because they're fearing that you're actually not going to come back ever. So, the environment of the puppies when they're bred could be also a big thing. But one thing is not causing it. It is the humans. So it is true that all dogs and puppies need to learn how to be on their own. But there is no, all the things that we can do at home. Another big myth, sorry, to go back on that, is ignoring your dog when you come back. I hear that a lot. I try not to make a big fuss when I'm back from an absence because that's going to give my dog separation anxiety. No, it isn't. And when a dog is already anxious and they're so distressed because you're not here, when you're back, the only thing they're going to want from you is comfort. So if you ignore them, it's just going to make them even more distressed because they already are distressed. So just leaving them with their fear is absolutely not the way to go. And it isn't definitely creating separation anxiety to show your dog you're happy to see them.
Yeah.
So you don't have to make like a big scene every time, but it is not going to cause that kind of issues.
Sure. And I suppose, I know it's a huge topic to question, but how could one start with a dog that doesn't, or let's presume the dog doesn't have separation anxiety, start leaving the house in a way that's not like, or that is least likely to cause issues in the future? I know it's not the person's fault, but how do you make it easier for a dog to know that you'll be coming back? Is it short periods away, like going out to bring the rubbish out to the street and coming back, and what's the best way to do it?
On the principles, yes, but a lot of times just going outside to take the rubbish out is too much already. Okay. So basically, the way we address separation anxiety, we make sure the dog is never left more than what they can handle. Mm-hmm. So if they can't handle you getting off the couch, we're going to start there, getting them to be okay with this. And when they're okay with this, we're going to try to get you to touch the door, and then we're going to get you to go out that door. But sometimes you start only in the room you're in. But before even starting to think about all like desensitization to absences, it is really important to make sure the dog develops a bit of autonomy in the house with your presence. Like the foundation skills that the dog needs to be okay on their own, they're actually skills that need to be worked on when you're present.
Yeah.
Okay. Before even being able to go out the door. But basically, yeah, we take it really gradually. And it is really important, because what I hear a lot of the time is, I only went out for 5 minutes and the dog barked the whole time. But if the dog is barking after 2 seconds, it means the 2 seconds were too much. So you have to take it down a notch and go with what they're comfortable. So that's a big thing.
That makes
and
a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah, because if you're going for like if the 5 minutes, if it is 5 minutes of panic, what the dog learns from this is that it is scary to be on their own, even though it is short. Because they don't see, like they don't have the same vision of time that we do. But if they're scared for 5 minutes, it is 5 minutes too many. So just, going out the door. Also, another thing that's really important would be to work on their self-confidence. Mm-hmm. This is usually when people come for consultation, before even starting to the proper desensitization, it is really important to find ways for each dog to make them feel self-confident and to make them able to make decisions and have a bit of autonomy, even though their humans are in the house. But otherwise, it doesn't go anywhere, and you're basically working on a house without foundations, or with not really solid foundations. So at some point, they're just going to collapse. So if we want to make sure the work is solid, it needs to be taken at the dog's rhythm, which is really hard. And I really feel for all those people who are working on their dog separation anxiety, because it means if taking the rubbish is too much, you can't go to the shop, and you have to make sure your dog is with someone. And that is a huge strain. And it is also one of the issues that take the most time to fix, because you need to go at the dog's rhythm. So some dogs will be okay in 2 months. Some dogs will be okay in 2 years, and rushing it never takes anybody anywhere. So we have to go at the dog's rhythm, and it is frustrating. It is a lot of work, but it is so rewarding when you can go for a drink, when your dog wasn't okay with you going in the next room.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. It's definitely a whole process. And you spoke about building up confidence. So for the person that's listening in right now and saying, God is my little puppy here next to me, or whatever dog they have, how do I build up confidence right away? I want to get started. Is play, for example, a good opportunity?
Yes. Yeah. It is definitely one of the things that is really important. There's basically 2 aspects of building up dog confidence that I try to promote first. The first one is enrichment, like providing activities to the dog that are just for the dog. That, for example, when your dog is chewing something, they're not worrying about you validating what they're doing. They're having a chew and they feel good, and they like it is producing endorphins in their body, and they're happy just doing that. And it doesn't involve you. You can be reading a book, you can be in the next room, you can be doing whatever you want, and the dog is feeling good. A little sniffing activities, for example, I quite often recommend to my clients to get rid of their bowls, like the food bowl. For example, if your dog is on dry food and you have a little garden, it takes you 30 seconds to scatter their food in the garden for them to sniff. This sniffing is so good for their mental activity. It is so amazing for a dog to be able to sniff for their food and to find it. Like there's nothing more rewarding.
Yeah.
So just little things like that, providing a bit of but a bit of brain activity. Playing is also definitely a big part of enrichment. Like dogs really need it, and to build a bond with your dog, it is definitely a big way to go. And the other aspect would be giving the dog choices. Like I am a firm believer in the fact that dogs need choices because they're stuck with us for everything. Like they need us to go for a walk, they need us to eat, they need us to tell them where to sleep, when everything. And just little things in the daily life that can be done to give them choices. For example, when you're going on a walk, it is really easy if you have a bit of a longer lead, or even if it's not long, just following your dog. Let them take you where they want to go, like having that choice to just go where they want, because it is their walk. Like, don't do that, obviously, when you have an appointment and you're in a rush. But if, for example, it is their walking time and they want to go this way, why not go with them?
Yeah.
Just let them sniff along the way, explore every little like pee-poo. Sorry, that's disgusting, but that's what dogs do. Explore everything. And also, another big aspect of choice is refusing an interaction. Because I see way too many times in the streets, whether it is interactions with dogs or with people, people telling their dog, go say hi. And sometimes like the whole dog's body language is saying, no, I do not want to do this. But then they're on a lead. And a lot of them, they won't develop any reactivity. They just take it. And that is so bad for self-confidence. Like, I don't know, I'm pretty sure everybody here had an old aunt that when we were kids, they would just like smooch us. And this is like, dogs feel like that on a daily basis 20 times, and giving them that opportunity to say, no, I do not want this, and advocating for them is really good for their self-confidence. Because if you have a dog that's able to say no and you listen to them, they're going to be able to make good decisions. And when we talk about good decisions, that could be settling when you're gone instead of destroying the couch. That is a big shortcut, but that is the general idea. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant, and it's really interesting to hear about that. You know, the choice, and you know, even maybe giving them their own space and things like that.
Where to sleep, for example. Like if you have, in my house, I have only one dog at the moment. I have like 4 or 5 beds, and he's allowed on the couch, on the bed. And so basically, if at night he wants to sleep on the couch instead of in his dog bed, that's fine. If he wants to sleep at another moment in another bed, like he has that option, always options to say, this is what I want right now. And to us, to honestly, in our daily life, it doesn't take any time. It doesn't make any difference for us.
Exactly. Yeah, and sometimes we feel a bit ridiculous because here we have multiple dog beds in different rooms for Ruby, and during the day if we're working on laptops and doing kind of more boring work than the public normally sees, you know, it's she's allowed to roam around wherever she wants in the house, or not wherever, but in multiple rooms, let's say. And sometimes she wants to be right up next to us, and other times she'd rather anything but. She usually has quite a lot of choice there. So it feels good that we're giving her choices, and it's not us.
Oh, and she probably is so much happier being able to do this. So that's amazing. Like, well done for doing it.
Well, yeah, I think she likes the idea of her own independence as opposed to actually being independent. She'll hold it out for 20 minutes and then she wants to be right next to you again.
Sometimes
Um,
it's just that feeling. Like, for example, when you go home and your partner is asking you what you want to eat, even though they have already cooked
yeah,
the dinner and they know that this is what you're going to have. They're like, what if we ate that? And you're like, yay. So then you feel like a bit empowered and a bit more confident than if the person comes and they're like, well, you're having this right now. This is the same outcome, but it's just a different way to present it.
yeah,
And you're happier
yeah,
with this.
exactly. You feel like you made the decision.
Somebody's
And
asking, where is the dog?
Chris, yeah, hashtag where's the dog?
He's actually in a different room.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned about things about pain. So I suppose there's this space here maybe for looking into pain management that we did speak with a couple of weeks ago. Do you see medicines and herbal remedies being sometimes not cures but aids and helps along the way with certain cases for separation anxiety, as well as toys and training and so on?
In some cases, yeah, they can be a bit of an aid. The same then anxiety medication could be a good support. It is the same idea, like on their own they won't do a thing, but coupled with all the training, making sure the dog is pain-free, because that's the big thing. Like before going for those things, you want to be sure that your dog isn't in pain, because then you can start all the desensitization in the word. You're not going to go anywhere, or you're going to make little progress, but then it's just going to fall apart at some point and it's not going to be stable. So definitely they can be. Yeah, I really believe, especially like you were talking about remedies, for example, gut support, supplements and things like that. Like, because if your dog is not feeling good in their gut, they're not going to feel good in general. And when you're going to go, it's going to be harder for them to cope. And it happens actually quite frequently that separation anxiety appears later in life. And the first thing I'm going to be looking for, I'm not going to do it myself because I'm not a vet, but I'm going to send people to their vets to investigate potential pain before starting to do anything else.
Which makes an awful lot of sense when you think about things like arthritis kicking in and all sorts of things. So presumably there's also kind of herbal remedies out there and more natural things that could potentially play a role, like CBD, like omega oils, things like that help with inflammation and help with overall. Maybe that's even potentially where the claims for anxiety have come from, that it's actually related to the pain overall.
Yeah, there was a study and an article from Daniel Mill that was saying that more than 80% of the behavior issues that happen were linked to a discomfort or a pain at some point, like different levels of pain. It could be different level of discomfort, but more than 80% of the behavior cases that we see were linked to that. So that is huge. So that is definitely, not only with separation anxiety, when there's a behavior issues, this is something you want to look for before you even think of doing any training, because if that can be solved with maybe some painkillers, with maybe adapting the feeding, all that kind of things, you don't have a training program, you just have a health problem that can be fixed probably quicker.
Absolutely. So it's really a huge topic, and there's so many different areas to it. It's not I can understand now why it can be quite difficult, especially if you're not specializing in it as a trainer, why a lot of trainers don't particularly love the topic, because it's like taking out if it was a book, it would be a big massive encyclopedia of things. It's not one thing. And it's not caused by just one thing. So thank you so much for sharing all of your insights into such a serious and relatively common issue, unfortunately, that needs to be worked on. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. I really
for having me.
Thank you for sharing all of your knowledge. And for anyone that's watching in, it would be great if you could go and have a check out of Leah's page. It's Harmony for Paws, the number 4, Harmony for Paws _dog_training. I'll be tagging this anyway in the in all the socials afterwards. If anyone's not following us, we're at Ruby Reese Official. And the one thing that I forgot to do that was super important for this topic, but it works if I do it now, is the disclaimer saying that if anyone is concerned about their dog or their own situation, do speak to a certified professional, because we've been having a nice conversation, but it's not necessarily being specific advice for you, your dog, and your environment.
Yeah, that is.
Thank you so much, Leah. Really, really
Thank you for
appreciate it.
having me. I
Thank
really
you.
enjoyed talking to you. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Have a great evening.
You too.